Ever wonder what you stop pretending and feel? I am Amanda Andrade, founder of Mastering Relationships Academy and author of If You Allow It, You Can Feel It. This is the Journey Unscripted podcast. Real conversations, unscripted moments, and the emotional truths that connect us all. On today's episode, meet Wade Richard, a gardener, educator, and a podcaster whose work bridges the words of history, horticulture, and community. As the garden at Historical Kummer Museum of Art and Gardens, where attends to one of Jacksonville's most treasured landscapes, preserving its beauty while sharing his stories with visitors. Thank you, Wade, for to being here with all of us. And it's a really an honor to have you in here.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's my pleasure to be on the Journey Unscripted, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. As we're talking about unscripted, right? We had this previous conversation like how to pronounce your name, how to pronounce a certain words. And really like we are just like getting the practice. So this way I can just honor your name and all of that. And just to get it started and to share with the audience about your story, the way that we met, it was very delightful because we were getting together in a creative club in town, and I was not even expecting to connect with people like you. And whenever I was listening to your story, that was like, okay, my audience is going to be so excited to hear about how did you get in touch with plants? How did you get started with all of that? So now, could you share with all of us about how did you get started?
Yeah, of course. So, I'll jump back, 15 years ago, I moved to New York City to be a fashion hairstylist in a world that I knew nothing about. I had been a hairdresser for, at that time, about 13 years, but I had visited Fashion Week one day and knew that this is what I was called to do. And so I had moved to New York and hustled and bustled and made my way through fashion and had been on national covers of Vogue and Marie Claire and worked in extravagant fashion shows. And it was just a really beautiful experience to know nothing about this world and to build my life, my career by doing this. And so in that time, I met a gentleman named Steven Schulman, and we became fast friends and then best friends. And then he asked me to marry him in the middle of Times Square after the show was called Beautiful by Carole King. And I was so excited, that I had this life that only people dream of, and we got married in St. Augustine, Florida, because Stephen was from Jacksonville. And so all of our friends and family came. Sorry.
Beautiful.
All of our friends and family came from New York with their new families and just celebrated this incredible love. We went back to New York, and 5 months later, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 3 pancreatic cancer. And life just flew upside down. Everything that I worked hard for kind of, not only was grieving my husband, but also grieving this career that I fell in love with, that I was so passionate about. And then COVID happened, and I said, Stevie, we have to go, back. We have to go to Florida. His mom had traveled, very close, beautiful family, had traveled to New York to be with us, to help me, to allow me to still do what I loved, up until COVID, because then everything shut down. But when COVID happened, then his mother couldn't visit, his sister couldn't visit anymore, his aunt and uncle, and I said, well, we need to be at a home spot, and I knew that she was actively dying, and it was just so hard to he fought for so long, but it was so hard to just handle it also all by myself. So we moved to St. Augustine, and then it really rapidly happened. And I knew that time was of the essence. And as Stephen progressively got worse with the diagnosis and the sickness of pancreatic cancer, I began to find plants. We had a friend who drove us from New York, and she had a van, and the story goes back to St. Augustine that year where we got married. And I was in charge of all of the arrangements for the tables. And of course, because I'm Wadley, I wait till the last minute. And the day before, Steven's like, well, who's bringing and I said, it's okay, I'll go. And I found this place called Leonardi's, which is this beautiful nursery in St. Augustine. And I got all of these arrangements and these little cute white flowers, and it was perfect. So when our friends had the van and she was getting ready before she was going back to New York to drop the van off, she said, wait, is there anywhere else that you'd like to go? And I said, you know what? Could you take me to this place called Leonardi's? And I bought my first 6 to 7 plants, and
Oh,
it changed my life. And as Stephen, passed on, it had used plants as such a grieving tool. And I had learned, like, as I was taking care of the plants were actually taking care of me. And I'm telling you, Amanda, I'm a little obsessive, and I'm not talking about 10, 20 plants. It started with the 7 at Leonardo's, and it was probably over 300 plants I had in our apartment. And it became part of my personality, really. I still had cut hair in St. Augustine, but my love for plants had been such a journey. And then, a year had passed, and I met a new friend, Malcolm, and we, had started going to all these botanical gardens and fell in love. And, and this is, something that you had asked, like, what are some things that you want to talk about? And I said, let's talk about living after death.
yes.
And not just living for yourself, but living for the people that you have loved and have supported, and they have supported you. I'm so blessed that Stephen's family is still so very close to me. And Malcolm and I had been together for 3 years, 2 years, and we're like, it's time to get married. Let's get married. And we decided to get married at the Cummer Museum. And again, I was in charge of all of the arrangements. And so I had for a year had grown these beautiful tropical plants, monsteras and banana trees and palms, and cut them down to the, nub, down to the roots for these arrangements. And it was just such a beautiful uh, a letter of love to just, like, me and Steven's story, and how I had done our arrangements for that wedding. It was just, I was so excited to, like, give this to our friends too. Almost all of our friends from New York who had came to Stephen and I's wedding came back to Florida from New York and from the other places they have moved since New York, but came to meet us and to celebrate Malcolm and I's love. And there next to me was all of Stephen's family. And Stephen's nephew was my best man. And his mother and I did the mother father, not father, the mother son, just what a beautiful, beautiful testimony of just not allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by everything else going on. I thought, oh, I need to run. I just need to go. How can I support Stephen's family as, his gay partner, his gay, husband? I know they love, but you get into your head and you make up these scenarios. And I got to the place where I learned that I just needed to love and let go and allow myself to be who I am. And if the people are going to love you, those are the people who are going to show up for you. And it was
Not only love you, but to accept you the way that you are.
right.
Those people who accept us the way that we are, they are real friends. And
Yeah.
that is the beauty about life. And just to catch up in everything that you've been sharing with us, first of all, thank you so much to be in a vulnerable seat. This is so powerful. And this is what we need in this world. It really become to the place of vulnerability, to embrace our power, because nowadays people are so afraid about being judged, about, oh, what they're going to think about me, and that is their projection and everything. So they created a shelf on themselves, on their life, preventing them to connect with others, or even preventing them to share this powerful story with us. Thinking about it, how many people that it's now listen to us that's gonna be like, wow, what is an inspired story? Wow, I have been through that kind of similarities, right? And not only that way, I believe in the moment that you had your dream to be a hairstyler in New York, and then in that moment, you experience all of that excitement and all of that journey of being creative, helping other people to step on their visual and all of that.
Yeah.
And then in that moment, you met the love of your life. And you were just asked to get married on the Times Square. How beautiful and how magical it is that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that information start to come in, and then I do believe that at first you're just like, what do I do with all of this? And you start question, I'm not sure if you start question what life is about, it or question about God. Sometimes we can question that whenever those moments happen, right? I had a that to myself, right? Why, God, it's this is happening, because we have that connection or that separation. Nowadays I have connection, but before I had this separation, like God is over here punishing myself that for some reason something that I did not meet his expectation or whatever I had at the belief system about God. And now this is happening in my life. And then you start just like, why, God? Why are you doing this way? In that moment, did you have any thought related to that? And if so, how did you break through on that?
I mean, I think genuinely we all, would question why God or whatever your higher being, is like, why? Why for what? And, I did, I think in the beginning, like, but Stephen was like, it's not a why. This is it. This is my reality. And I am going to forage for, you know, onward. I'm going to, move in the direction of I'm still alive. And it taught me, so much about uh, one's character and strength. There's so many times I've had a hard day, and I'm done. I'm not doing the laundry. I just want to be done. And Stephen be going through treatment and do his life and live life. And I am so honored to taught have been taught these lessons by knowing Stephen and loving Stephen. Some people had asked, too, they were like, you and Stephen had been married for 6 months. Like, you didn't think this is too much? Like, I couldn't handle. I mean, Amanda, life, I think, and I don't think people really understand sometimes, even if you have an aunt or uncle, until it's like, a parent or someone that you're there and you're dealing with 24/7. I mean, I became a fashion hairstylist to a full-time caregiver, nurse. I mean, giving shots, putting in feeding tubes, filling feeding tubes, and it just was just like life had changed like that. And we're still not nights, not weeks, months in the hospital. And, Steven still, like, even at the end, had talked to hospice about going home. It's getting towards the holidays. And for some crazy reason, his oncologist had said, well, maybe you can go to Shands and have a liver transplant. And that was not going to happen. I mean, I think it's just wrong that they had even gave this to him. And, we had said, I had said personally, I said, Stevie, like, you're walking, you know, you want to go and do this? And he's like, yes, yes. Like it could be one, my last chance. And I was just like, I love you. I'm going to stand behind you. This is what you want. And unfortunately, he got sepsis, the minute that they had opened him up to even look at possibly doing a procedure. And that was it, and then it was just the next 3 weeks, 2.5, I think, until he passed away from hospice at home. But at least he got to be home and, celebrating Christmas and he was with his family. COVID was still happening. So I couldn't even go, I couldn't spend the night with him. And I was very strict about when I could be there because COVID was still happening. Yeah. So all of this, yeah. And then this is your life for 3 years, and then your person passes away. And then what do you do at that moment? It was so
Please continue. I was going to ask a question.
I just also wanted to gather my thoughts too, because it was so different. I think I sat amongst the plants for probably a week, just every morning, till midnight, and just sit in there. And just reflect on how, tragically beautiful it was, how all of our people showed up and we never felt alone. And except in the hospital rooms when there were no choice, no answers that you want to hear from the doctor. But physically, we weren't alone. And mentally and spiritually, our people showed up and they still show up. They still show up, which is so beautiful. I think, how do I have these lifelong friends? I mean, this whole holiday season was filled with mutual friends who are now friends of my husband's, and they talk to my husband personally. We're to Disney in a couple weeks with a friend that I met through Steven, and we've been close friends all these years. And, I said, oh, well, Malcolm's going to handle all of the details for this. And she's like, oh, great. I have his number. I'm going to text. And it was just like, how blessed are you, Wadley, that you have this community that loves you and supports you, and that's how you have to continue to go on. Because every time I was in the darkest moment, I thought Stephen fought till the end. I mean, yeah.
And in that moment, what comes to mind? It is just in that moment, were you able to experience being humble, like humility, like what life is bringing to you, to seeing, interacting with that love and experience? How could you describe for us being humble in this experience?
It's a great question. I think not just the word humbled, but just the thought of it was more of like uh what do they call it? Sorry, it just slipped my mind.
You okay? Come to mind.
Imposter syndrome. It was kind of like imposter syndrome, which I still fight with sometimes, And it was, these people can't really love you like this, I don't deserve this, and you have to get to the place to heal those childhood wounds of feeling abandoned, of feeling and this brings up the good, part of, I hope this isn't too woo woo or spiritual, but I came
We're fine.
came from a very Christian background and then went through an ex-gay ministry to become straight, and then had a really weird relationship with God and Christianity and who I am and how I fit in. So I, had started reading this book back in my early, I think, teens, The Secret. And
Well, congratulations.
really started studying the law of attraction. And I believe, I've manifested in New York. It is being at the right place at the right time, but I don't believe that those opportunities happen unless there's a divine purpose. And so, I believe that, like, that goodwill and trying to attract the things that I know that God gave me the gifts for. Like, if I didn't, love doing hair and was good at it, I wouldn't have these opportunities.
Yes.
So I, really manifested these happenings in New York. And it's funny because there I was with my plants healing, manifesting the next chapter. And when I tell you this story, your mouth is probably going to drop and be like, what? But how I got, and I did eventually, after 2 years, 3 years, my passion for plants, I was like, I need to sell house plants. So I do that as in markets and as a side gig, but I do have a full-time job, and I left hairdressing over a year ago. um, Malcolm and I got married at the Hummer Museum.
And how did you meet him?
How I met Malcolm. Um, I was tired of just kind of being sad and doing things by myself. I was like, I need to meet people. You meet people online, so or through apps now. It's moved from online to apps, right?
It's the new era.
Right.
Nowadays, it's just everything's connected, everything's online. You're not the only one. I personally prefer the old school. You go and then you meet people naturally, right? But in the nowadays, we need to adjust to what it is. And, that's what it is. Let's go in the flow. So perfectly understandable. And even like for a friendship, that's the reason that I went to the creative club that day that we met, because being connected with other creatives, it just give you so much to share and just to connect. And so especially after the pandemic, we just stay away, and people were so afraid to hug. People were so afraid just to be there because we did not know what's going to happen. And I do believe that the COVID hit us to keep evolving as a human species, right? And you're talking about all of the manifestation part and all of that. We are spiritual beings. We are energy. And because we are energy, we attract our, let's say, lessons in life for us to evolve. And totally understandable the way that you got started with Steve and seeing your journey and the progress and everything. I'm a huge fan of like metaphysics, quantum physics.
Yes.
We all connect for a certain reason. We are here to serve each other. And the beauty of your journey to connect with the plants. The plants helped you to stay grounded. Totally. And what people don't, they take to granted, right? The plants release the oxygen that we need to breathe. All the plants, we are not here, and people don't realize that. And just like a lot of trash and a lot of things. And I mean, that's why I'm so excited with the work that you do, because you are also an educator. You can educate people so this way they can have awareness. And once you have awareness, you are able just to expand your consciousness, and you are able to take responsibility and leave a legacy for the earth, because it's coming from the other generations, right? We're going to leave this in here for the future generations. So it's so on and so forth. But coming back to the meeting your currently husband, right?
Yes. So so we had been talking for a while, and before meeting, and one day I had went on a date with a gentleman at this taco shop, and Malcolm had seen me, and he's like, writes me, and he says, "Oh, I saw you at the taco shop." And I said, "Oh yeah." He's like, you know, "Do you have a partner?" And I said, "Oh no, I don't have a partner. I was just like on the worst date of my life." He's like, "Oh, because I saw you." I was like, "I wish you would have texted me, because I would have been like, my friend's here, I gotta go." Obviously, we had only been talking at that time and had not met, and it would have been a very awkward. But he's like, "You have this red rose shirt on." And I was like, "Yes." So then we were gonna meet up again, and then my nephew uh, had asked me to do something, and I was like, "Sorry, man, I'm gonna do something with my nephew." And he's like, that was a check mark that I was like, "Oh, this guy's a family guy. Like I would be interested to talk." And then we went on a date to McKee Botanical Gardens in Vero Beach. Oh, it's so beautiful. This was like we had known each other and had hung out, but this was like our first real date, like probably a month and a half in. And but it was there that I was kind of like, oh, I think I could like him a lot. And he said that he, felt the same way. And we, our families have blended in so beautifully. We all were together for my birthday this last weekend, and it was, thank you. And it was just so beautiful to see my sister-in-law from Stephen and my nephew with my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law with Malcolm's family, and all of us sitting together, and just it's so beautiful. And I,
Yes.
I'm just so grateful that I have that in my life.
And it's really beautiful. And it's just giving us so much inspiration just to listen to your story and everything that you've been through. And just now to have all of this support
Yeah,
from the family and now connect with your current husband and just to be in a space that you probably not thought that you could be.
ever, ever. I mean, I had family that said, Wade's gay. We don't want him around our kids. I mean, these are my siblings. So to have, like Wesley grow up, I mean, Wesley and I've been in Wesley's life since he was probably 7, 8. I mean, and now he's going to be 19 in a few weeks. Like, to have that kind of relationship. And, I know that my mama is probably like, wow, I have no relationship with blood, but and that goes to show that like sometimes our chosen family are, and it wasn't even chosen, right? I mean, I did choose Stephen, but after Stevie passed away, I mean, I, they're like, wait, you're my family. But, I am just like, wow, this is so beautiful that we have grown into this. I mean, I could call her for anything, and I know that she would drop anything to help me out and vice versa, it's just so beautiful.
It
Not a
is.
lot of people get that.
Sorry, say again.
And not a lot of people have that.
It they don't. It's the emotional support,
Right.
right, that we can have. And that's the soul family. Because in my experience, believe it or not, for whoever it's listen to us, right? Because we can just hit some belief systems and that is okay. But we choose our family to experience this lifetime. And most of our challenges and growth comes from the family members, comes from our parents, comes from our siblings. And in my case, I was abandoned and rejected by my father before I was even born. And so I was carrying rejection and abandonment until 30 years old. That's when I start to realize and start to understanding that my emotional patterns from my childhood was affecting my adulthood. And how could I shift that mentality? How could I shift that frequency? How could I shift that belief system? Because the way that we perceive life is the way that we see ourselves. And so I had that dynamic from my childhood, which is represent in our subconscious mind, which it is 90% of our operations. And it's just belief systems, intuition, emotions, and all of the traumas that we had. And if we don't give the right attention, our life, we're going to manifest unconsciously the life that we don't want it or the life that we want it. Come back to the point that how can I connect with myself? And just like those deep conversations that we are having, what life means, what is life is about it, what is God, what is the perception that I have about God? And that's the beauty that you just share about the grief. But the only thing that we are sure about life, that we're all gonna die physically and pay taxes.
Right. Right.
And
And the
so
and the rest is just a wash, right? I mean, and I believe the changing point for me was when I started realizing when you had said, "Oh, what was that feeling that you had?" And I said, I was like, hi, I had imposter syndrome. I thought, how could someone love me like this? But it was that moment where I realized that, you don't have to react in those old patterns. It took a lot of therapy and a lot of, pings. I like, I get this from TBM, to be magnetic, and they call them pings, and they're kind of just like a test. Like, how are you going to react? You feel, you're tired, you feel self conscious, you're out, your partner says something. How are you going to react? You're going to react in that old stop, hurt, I feel
mentality.
mentality, or are you gonna, like you said, or are you gonna introspect and be like, what did that 6 year old when need at that moment where he felt abandoned, tired, alone? Your partner didn't ask if you wanted a drink, when he went to the bar, and you come back and you're like, what about me? And it's like, what is that mentality? Like, we're all so human. We don't always have to be hyper focused on, the negative, finding something to always be. And that's where I started to really learn how plants too, like taking care of plants, and taking care of myself, and using different methods to, we use all these methods to propagate plants. And when you propagate a plant that has a sickness or something that's not well, and it gets healthier, it usually grows from two spots. That node, that area that you pruned, there will be multiple growth points. And it's like us too, when we, allow ourselves to be like, okay, I can think about this differently. I don't have to react like 12-year-old that felt abandoned, by whatever reason. And
Mhm.
I used to think, inner family systems is a word for it, where you are working on inner child stuff. I used to always think that was so weird and woo woo. And until I started doing it, I've been able to allow myself to feel the love, like at that birthday party, to sit there and not feel like, oh my God, I don't belong here. I feel awkward. I feel whatever these weird things that I think of after being with my partner for uh, over 4 years, and living this life. You still have these weird, I personally have these weird moments where I don't feel connected, because I'm so, you know uh
Program.
candid, yeah, programmed to think that you're not lovable. And
And that is
yeah, and so once you feel that, you can feel it. Once you heal that, you can feel that.
that's the reason I named my book as "If You Allow It, You Can Feel It." It's all about that. And what I would like to expand in this conversation, and not only that from our audience, right? You spoke about the religion that you growing up being Christian, and how has been the transformation, because you have the idea that, oh, if you are, I don't know the word in English, but when you like a man in a woman, that's a hetero.
Heterosexual,
Yeah, but and then when you like the same sex,
homosexual.
yeah. So the homosexual, thank you. The homosexual was not allowed to the religion in that time, and still to the nowadays. So how was it for you, or still it is, to reframe that belief system? Because also, like, how God can accept myself having the desire with a man to the same sex. How has been that journey for you, Wade? Because not only for you, for many of people out there, they also been through this. And also, whenever you talk about rejection, right, everybody has a different way of being rejected in life. And so I can see, in a way, you being rejected in that regard. And if it is not, please correct me. So would you share with us how has been this journey in specific? Because religion and accepting yourself for who you are, and just honoring yourself for your taste for another man, and so this way people can be inspired as well.
Yeah, I grew up in a very conservative Pentecostal church with family friends. My mom didn't go to this church, but I had went to the church from preteen to teen. And I came out, and it was like everything switched. It was, I became the scapegoat of the evil spirit in the church. And every Sunday, the elders, all the men of the church would lay hands on me and cast out the demon of homosexuality. My pastor, his friend from college, was running the largest Exodus ex gay residential ministry in the country, in the world, I think. And they were moving their ministry from San Rafael, California to Memphis, but I was very young. I was 16, and they had said, "Oh, that there's nothing that we can do to help Wade at this time." Uh,
Did you share with them as a human? Like, oh, I like men. So did you share, or how did they find out about?
I mean, I was you can see pictures of me at that time. I mean, I looked like a gay kid. And I was who I was. I didn't start really transforming who I was until I started going to the ex gay ministry. But I had, like the instant of it, it was like a Wednesday night, and we're all praying and we're all saying, it's intimate with your friends, all your teenage friends. And I'm like, I have same sex attractions. And that's, how I came out. And it was, and this is what I will say about my relationship and my own experience. I was in love with Jesus. I did see you at the pole and invited people to come pray at the pole. I read the word of God regularly and felt like I had a strong relationship. And then I was sold this lie that Jesus is going to take my sins away and my same sex attractions, and I'm going to be healed
Wow.
and I can serve God and have a wife and have a family because this is what I'm told that I'm supposed to buy into. And I went through the X Game ministry. Well, yeah, I went through the X Game ministry. I graduated from the program and started, touring the country how I had been healed from homosexuality when inside I, had the same sex attractions that I never got rid of. But now my thought process is this is as perverted as bestiality, as pedophilia, as all of these things that we had when our program was based around the 12 steps, like AA. So
Phenomenal program.
exactly. So, we would confess all of these sins that have led us into, this lifestyle of homosexuality. And so it really mentally, I still at times have to remember like, this isn't who you are, that you don't have to react this way.
Okay. The program in society is just like the moral standards
Right.
and the societal standards, just like programming on who we are, but we are not the identity that they are putting on us, and then using religion to concrete on it and
Yeah.
just to seal, and
And
then for us,
therapy, religion, therapy. This is therapy. This is healing. This is good, So for years, I was like, I don't need a therapist, But things didn't really start changing for me as an adult, and to allow myself to really be healed from the ex gay ministry. I mean, I had fluffed up, and I have no feelings about this. And then friends had written me and said, like literally over 20 friends were like, hey, are you in this Netflix documentary? And I'm like, what? And there I am, 18-year-old Wade Lee, broken with a camera for television for 2020, ABC's 2020, and just broken. And I was mortified when I found out that I didn't know that this was even, getting released or published or, yeah.
and how was to interact with, because you're going to the program just to not be more gay and to adjust to their norm, to their rules. And now you're on the TV, and then you still have the desire for another man. How was for you to interact with guilt and self punishment
I
if you
mean,
had it?
I still deal with it. There's things
Mhm.
that, you know, that I'm like, oh, we don't talk about that. We don't, we should. And why? My therapist is, uh, has been through religious trauma as well, and um, sees a lot of clients. And she really started asking why, like, why do you have to feel this way, Wade? Like, and it's like, wow, I'm programmed to think this, that you know I shouldn't be too effeminate, or I shouldn't like this because it's girly. It's just like so weird, even as an adult. So uh, I'm on the journey of uh, really being my authentic self, and I think that shows. Like, I love social media, and I have a pretty big social media presence, all from just me being authentically me, which will sing and lip sing and dance and be, who I was before I met Jesus and the church and everything that I thought, you know, was going to heal me. I'm the authentic person, again. It's cool. And let's go back to the story of Malcolm and I and the wedding, because this fits in so perfectly. Know, Meeting Malcolm really helped me to be more childlike. He's younger than me, but allowed me to um, explore those versions of myself that I needed to heal, that I needed to just let go. And so I'll tell one story and then come back to the wedding. My husband works for a bank that was the sponsor for the Jacksonville Pride. And so we were able to march with him with I was able to march with him, and we had these I had these two flags that we had at the house that were rainbow flags, and the entire time of the parade and this is not something that I would do, Amanda. I mean, not in front of people, at least. But I allowed myself, and let me tell you, uh the previous prides were not very great experiences, because I was still stuck in my shame and pain, and wanted to rage, like everything. I just had an attitude about everything. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not to myself, and not to my husband, who, and obviously I'm not going to do it at with his employer. But that was not even the issue. The issue really was like, I'm going to be my free self. And it's funny, um, the bank that he works for, their pride video that they had, there I was doing, and I'm thinking, oh my God, my husband, you have more footage on there than I do, and I work there. But it's just a beautiful example of just allowing, the shame and the pain, and just have fun. Like, life's short, and I've learned life is short, and we don't have to always, have a bee in our bonnet. But the wedding, so we get married at the Comer on the 19th, and we do all the arrangements on the tables. And I went to pick them up that Monday, and I had seen a volunteer weeding in the garden. And I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, how do I get a job working with you?" And she said, "Oh, honey, I pick weeds for free." And I was like, "Well, I'm off on Mondays. That sounds great." And she said, "Well, the curator who is in charge of this is walking around the gardens." And I was like, "Well, I have a big box of stuff. I'm not going to look for her. But if I see her," and there we meet right at the gate. And she introduced herself, and I introduced myself. And I said, "Oh, I'd love to volunteer. It's such a beautiful place. I got married here. I created these arrangements for our tables. I grew them in my garden, in my backyard." And she's like, "Oh, you're a plant person." I said, "Yeah, I have a plant podcast, a plant business." She's like, "Well, we're hiring for a gardener." I was like, "What?" And there it was, a manifestation. And the rest, a year and 2 months later, here I am working, and building a career as a professional horticulturist. And only because, divine moments of, allowing myself to dream big, and those moments of being, I'm going to start a plant podcast. Who knows where this could go? You know, I've been able to interview and meet so many incredible people in the industry, and then see them at plant conventions and have lunch with them, and share Airbnbs with them. It's just it's a world and a life that I never imagined. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful testimony of not allowing pain to destroy you. That, especially in grief of losing a loved one, it is your responsibility to live your life to the fullest and honor, and
Always.
in the moments where it gets the worst and the hardest, that's what you can lean on to, and it will give you strength.
Absolutely. Beautiful sharing. Thank you so much for us to sharing your strength with all of us. It's very inspiring. And that is the reason that I started to doing this podcast, really. To listen to people with stories, to listen to see how they break through the emotional blocks that they were experienced as a hypnotherapist and an intimacy relationship coach. I feel so inspired just to share all of the challenges and all of the beauty on my I cannot from my clients, but that's the reason that I just like, okay, if I cannot do that from my clients, how I can share those stories with others, so there is this way they can feel inspired and just it's just so fulfilled to my heart, because for me intimacy it's in this level that we can be ourselves, authentic selves, come to the place of vulnerability, because I'm not afraid to share my life story with you and for whoever it's listen, because who can just I typically say that who can not damage, it's not the word in English that I'm looking for, who can hurt yourself more than you?
Yeah.
Nobody else, because typically we are all on enemies because we have all of those inner voices telling us things. That's why I was asking you, how did you deal with guilt? How did you deal with self punishment? Because those inner voices, if we don't address them properly with love, forgiveness, acceptance, because they were created as a time in our life to support us, to help us. Even like people say, how crazy is that? Yes, it is crazy, but not crazy if you start to understand the reason that we did not have our needs met as a child. We created those stories in our mind. And we've been living those stories until the time that we say, it's over. I'm done. And now I'm going to open my heart to experience life in a different way. Unfortunately, typically we choose the pain to opening up in those moments, or unexpected moments, as you did it with Steve. That was your time for you to open your heart and to embrace who you are. And then just to be your authentic self. And when we do that, how much power it's within that. It's just, for me, it's just each and every day I am so grateful to serve humanity the way that I do serve, and just to be in the space that I can support others. Not even that, it's just like just to listen. This is so fulfilling for me. So thank you so much for that. And I'm pretty sure that our audience will be grateful for that, because you just share so much power with us.
Thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to Jack's creators. Is that okay? Uh, yeah, because it's just been a beautiful place to meet people that I've connected with so beautifully with in Jacksonville. So I'm so glad that Ryan, has this Jack's Creators event about once a month. It's been, and it's a beautiful, beautiful organization. I'm so glad that we got to meet there.
Yeah, exactly. Ryan over here. So a very busy schedule, but if it is meant to be, that's gonna happen. And then we're gonna have this open space, so this way he can share with us too what has been his drive to create this community, because everything is about community.
Totally.
That's how we can connect, that's how we can relate it, and that's how we feel belong,
Yeah.
basically, but not physically. And now, as we're going through at the end of our podcast, I would ask you, you have this opportunity, Wade, to give your word to the world, right? Everybody's gonna receive your message on the as right now. And it's going to be on the television, everywhere, outdoors. What would be your message for us this time?
Love each other, love each other. Me and Stevie would always say radiation doesn't heal cancer. What is the I'm so sorry. What is the
You're fine.
I block it out because it's such I'm like, I don't even want to remember the word. Um chemo,
Chemo.
chemo doesn't heal cancer. Radiation doesn't heal cancer. Love heals cancer. We would always say love heals cancer. And so, that's what I say to the world right now. It feels like cancer is eating us up. I don't care, where you are in the world and what's going on. You have to see that there's just hatred and people not connecting and not loving. It's love is going to heal that truly when we love each other. When you see someone at the gas station and you're annoyed and you have that ping, that thing that you react because we react for whatever reasons as we believe. But when you have that ping, think love, and that lead your life with that. And I believe that that will change all of humanity. So that would be my word, is to just
Beautiful.
love and love yourself.
First,
When you have that ping of that voice, I don't look good. I don't, I'm not good enough for this. I can't do this job. That's not true. Fight that with loving yourself and believing and knowing that you can.
beautiful, beautiful. That make me time. I invite my clients to think about it. What love would do in this situation? It
Yeah.
goes like, oh, but also sometimes it's hard for them to imagine that because about like the self-love, right? The self-worth. They don't think that they are worthy of love. And then I go like, have you ever thought that you came from love? God is love. We came from a source which created us from love. Anything out of love, it's on your mind and it's not healthy because the mind creates something not based on love. That's why I'm very thankful that you shared that. And I would like to invite you guys, the audience, to think about it. How love would, in this situation, what love would say? And I think it's just beautiful. Just like you say, love yourself first, because I can only extend this love to others if I do that for myself. If I don't do, I'm pleasing. And then that comes back to another dynamic, which we're not going to have a time in here now. But, love yourself first. And when you love yourself first, and then you got your standards and you honor yourself, you accept, forgiving yourself, you are just who you are. And then you're going to connect with others that are in the same frequency and vibration. That's life. And then you continue to expand and all of that. So thank you so much for this
Pleasure.
time. And for you that would like to see Wade works and connect with him, I'm gonna just put on the description for you his links. So this way, send him a message and just to share your feelings that you had it often listen to his story. And so this way, you guys can stay connected. So thank you so much for listening to this, and I see you in the next podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.